Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Shadow of Kyoshi chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 1, which is called Unfinished Business. So this is the first proper chapter of the book after the prologue. This was also, most of this chapter was the first preview pages we got for the book, so a lot of people have obviously read most of this one. So what this chapter is about is it's basically our, reintroduction to Kyoshi. And they do it quite interestingly in that the first section of this starts off with basically the Dao Fei of the Triad of the Golden Wing from their perspective as they're guarding Lun Kao city block. This is Mok's forces, Uncle Mok from the first book, his forces. And we just get this idea they're preparing for some sort of an attack that's coming in, and then their section finishes off with the idea that Kyoshi just arrives on the scene, taking a lot of them out. Then the second half of the chapter switches to Kyoshi's perspective and goes back to cover how she came to make her way down into the section. So the second half sort of merges with the first half, and you get sort of both sides of the perspective. And I think it serves its purpose very well because you get what Kyoshi looks like from outsider's perspective as she comes in, no nonsense with the makeup, and especially because she gets her throat cut. Someone with a garrote tries to choke her out, and so she has blood all across her neck. Except she wears the white makeup, so it looks kind of brutal. It looks like she's been beheaded and has her head stitched back on. So it adds to the look that she took that injury as they went through it. And just they are terrified. Especially because it's the first section is from this character Kuji, who obviously is one of the Dao Fei here. He's a younger Dao Fei. He sees Kyoshi for the first time, and there's a great moment towards the end of this where Kyoshi comes up in front of him and he thinks he's about to be killed, and he says, "The Avatar, protect me." And he says, "Yang Chen, protect me." And she just says, "Yang Chen isn't here right now, I am." And so she just has to, basically she's going to threaten him as the younger member of the group. And then as we transition over to Kyoshi's perspective, we find out that she sees a little bit of lack in him because he's a younger Dao Fei, and she has to deal with the idea that she still is Dao Fei. She considers herself Dao Fei, and even though she's out and open as the Avatar at this point, trying to help the world, she's still doing it from the perspective of being Dao Fei. So that is continuing with all those rules of not serving any lawmakers, abiders, that sort of stuff. So she's doing this because this is what she thinks she needs to do, and that is taking down the Dao Fei who give Dao Fei a bad name. So she believes still in the sort of value of the Dao Fei of the style of the Flying Opera Company, just because of how bad things are in the Earth Kingdom. They have no proper leadership. Why should you respect the leadership of the Earth Kingdom when they allow stuff like, as we see in this section, the lower ring of Ba Sing Se to be as it is, and stuff like what's happening here to happen. So this is Mok obviously transitioning from being sort of out in the country to moving this Triad of the Golden Wing, the new Yellownecks, basically inside Ba Sing Se. And Kyoshi's coming in to take them out. We get the sense that there's been a bit of a time skip. Not too long has passed. Kyoshi was 17 for most of the previous books. She's still 17 here. There's actually a section relatively early in the book where they actually say this is this day in the era of Kyoshi. So you can actually work out more or less her exact age down to the month and more or less day. So she still is 17 and a bit at this. So the impression I get is that at most maybe 2-3 months have passed, but that whole 2-3 months, this is what she's been doing. She's been going after really brutally any Dao Fei who are causing trouble around the place and taking them out. And she's also, specifically here, coming after Mok because she knows how terrible he is because, of course, Zhu. Zhu and Mok, the connection through the Yellownecks. Mok is basically the second in command of the Yellownecks. And so that's what she does here. She comes in, she takes everyone out, and is just in complete command. And it's meant to be a complete contrast to the way she sort of was when she met Mok for the first time, and he was in complete control. She didn't know what to do. We already saw her sort of reverse that dynamic the second time she met Mok, but here especially we see that she just does not see him as anything special, because ultimately he wasn't. He just was able to be a decent leader, but he didn't plan things through properly. He had power just because of the pretty much some of the weirder customs of the Dao Fei is pretty much why he is the way he is. And he's basically just asking her, what is it that you want? And she just says, I want you all to surrender your weapons, vacate the premises, and march yourself to a magistrate's courthouse for judgment. The nearest one is 7 blocks from here. So just completely commanding of this. Markov, of course, orders his men to attack her, and you get this great line. The hatchet men charged from all directions. Kyoshi drew one of her fans. 2 would have been a bit much. And so immediately after this, we just cut to another scene. Kyoshi stepped over all the groaning bodies. She'd taken everyone out. And this is where she threatens Mok. Tell me, basically how all this happened. He tries to sort of threaten her with the idea of so you're going to murder me in cold blood like you did Zhu. May you be ripped apart by thunderbolts and many knives for slaying your sworn brothers. And so we get Kyoshi's perspective on the idea that she killed Zhu. She's killed someone. How does she feel about that now? And she ultimately explains it to herself that she gave him a chance to yield. He didn't. She did what she had to do. But it says here, and yet during sleepless nights she thought about Zhu. The vile man infected her thoughts when she thought she could have been dreaming of those she loved. She thought about Zhu a great deal, his weight in her hands, and how at the end of their fight she decided. And what she says to Mok is, anything goes in the late tie. So she goes back to he is trying to basically say, you are not an actual Dao Fei because you killed one of your brothers. And she brings up another Dao Fei rule of the way it is in the late tie. The winner decides when it's over. And, both of them, the way the fight was going is that it basically was a fight to the death. So it's actually a very good defense. And she just says, I'm not going to kill you. You and your men got a foothold inside the walls rather quickly for a gang of countryside bandits who spent most of their history bullying farmers. You have a contact in Ba Sing Se who's helping you. I want to know who it is. So he ultimately reveals that it's someone in the middle ring. We use go-betweens. I don't know their name. And this is when Wei comes back in. So Wei was obviously the character from the first book. He was the one who injured Lek during their first meeting. Mok just had Lek hurt by Wei because Lek spoke out initially, and we saw Kyoshi defend Lek from Wei later on in that book. And here it's completely changed. Completely changed. He comes in about to try and take Kyoshi out, but this is what happens. But when he saw the intruder was Kyoshi, dressed in her full makeup and regalia, he gasped and nearly halted in midair. Wei was one of the few witnesses who had seen her in the avatar state, and the experience had overawed the spiritual man. He stepped back to give her space, nearly knocking his brother over in his haste, and dropped to his knees. The knife that had been aimed at Kyoshi a second before, he placed at her feet like an offering. And Mok is just oh, come on. Not realizing just how completely dominated by Kyoshi he just has been. So that is basically Mok taken out at this point. So the next, and I suppose the last section of the chapter here is this interesting one. So she steps outside of Lun Kao city block, which, just a brief thing on the location there. It's obviously this giant sort of multi-layer kind of city block type thing that has sort of pathways on the sides and so on. But also they reveal that sort of almost secretly to some people, Lun Kao city block goes down below the surface. So when Kyoshi sort of drills her way down with earthbending to avoid most of the guards, to get all the way down to the bottom to Mok, she goes way, way, way down in Ba Sing Se. Basically the idea is she almost gets down into the catacombs of old Ba Sing Se. That's how far down they are, because they talk about the crystals giving off light and stuff like that. So she comes back up here onto the sort of surface here, and we find out that she has sort of been working with the captain of the kind of guardsmen of Ba Sing Se here. But she does note that she hadn't been going against her Dao Fei oaths, which is that she would never become a lackey of the law. But she explains it that Lee had been her tool, her informant, not the other way around. So she's using him because, she's the Avatar. She's going to get help from the actual authorities in certain situations. Why not use that? But she's going to use it, not work for them. So that's quite interesting. So we find out that this is where it all sort of like twists, and it's revealed to be this person from the middle ring organizing everything, who's revealed to be Minister Woe or whatever, Minister WO. He has been behind all of this, and that he actually has these guards working for him, and that he assisted the Golden Wings in getting a footing in the lower ring of Ba Sing Se, because specifically he wants Lung Kao city block sort of taken out. And the only way that can happen is if the law can properly go in and take out that area. Which the only way they can do that is if bandits come in and take it over. So he sort of manipulates this situation where he has the triads come in and take over Lung Kao city block, like we saw with Mok there. Then Kyoshi comes in, and with the help of the guards, they take out and get rid of the Dao Fei. And they use this as an excuse to finally basically remove all of the people from this specific section. Because Kyoshi mentions that, like, in one of her journals, it's mentioned by John Zhu. That's what she's going off for a lot of her sort of lay of the land type stuff, is that John Zhu notes that the area that Lung Kao city block is in is actually a pretty valuable area of land, even though it's within the lower ring of the city. So people from the middle rings would actually like to have that land to do something with, and they need to get rid of the people who are living there, who obviously lower rings, so they're very, very poor. And what Captain Lee here is using this as the excuse to get everyone out of the situation. So that's he says, "All right, boys, get the vermin out of here." And the twist, of course, comes when Kyoshi realizes that what's going on. Kyoshi watched another set of officers come out, hustling a woman by the back of her neck. She held a wailing child in her arms. The man with bad vision heard the cries and began thrashing harder in the guard's grasp. They weren't triad members. They were one of the poor families who lived in the city block. And so this is where we get Kyoshi sort of turning on the guards here, realizing that they've also been sort of corrupted somehow. And the second the Lee reveals, he's like, "Do you want to cut? If you do, you'll have to talk to my man in the middle ring." So there's your connection. Man in the middle ring for Mok, man in the middle ring for Captain Lee. That's the situation going here. It might be Captain Lai, it's L-I. I'm not sure about the pronunciation. Audiobook isn't out yet, of course. And so immediately as Kyoshi begins to see more and more sort of kids, kind of mothers and stuff like that, crying about what's going on, she begins to act. And so immediately what she does is she uses earthbending to put clumps of earth over all of the guards' mouths, completely blocking off their sort of airflow. So they're sort of on the ground, freaking out about what's going on. And she, saves Lee for last and goes over to him. This is where it's revealed that it's Minister Woe, so a minister from the middle ring of the city is manipulating things to get poor families moved out of the only home that they have just because of land. She realizes, this is why she's Dao Fei. The corruption within the Earth Kingdom of anyone in a sort of actual position of power. She does not like that at all. And what she does here, because they're actual, like, valid guards, is she takes their sort of headbands, and it's noted that there are like there's a number for them as an officer. Where's this? Yeah, the badges of every official in Ba Sing Se had identification numbers engraved on them, in testament to the city's massive bureaucracy. So she could just take those badges from them, and then later at one of the offices, I suppose, find out the specifics on these guards to obviously change things within the city. So that's what's going on here. And she says, "Here's what's going to happen, Captain. You are going to clear the block of triads and no one else. Then you are going to find paper and brush. You will write a full confession detailing this woe person and every bribe you took from him. Every stroke of it the truth. Do you hear me, Captain Lai? I will check. I want you to pour your very spirit out in this confession." And so he basically is forced to agree to this. But this is when Kyoshi then goes over to, I suppose, try and comfort the people who have just gone through something quite terrible happening, because she has had to, violently go through effectively the building where they live to take out the triads. And then she's taken out the guards to help the people. But they view her as just being this incredibly violent person. Again, like we saw at the very start of the chapter with the way the Dao Fei looked at Kyoshi. That's why it was so significant that it's from their perspective. They just see this giant woman in, white face paint with like a red scar across her neck because of her injuries, who's just taking everyone out relentlessly. And now she's approaching just, kids and mothers and stuff like that to try and comfort them. So immediately it's like, don't touch them, stay away. They only view Kyoshi as being this kind of violent character. And this is the persona she has, taken on over these last few months, is that this is what she does. She goes into places and takes people out. She doesn't have a relationship as such with the citizens. It's because she's only recently sort of known as the Avatar. They don't know what to make of her because she's so different than like every other Avatar. And it's a really nice way to end the chapter, The stares of the ordinary citizens and the terrified family made Kyoshi's skin prickle with a feeling that corrupt men like Lee or Mok could never force on her. Shame. Shame for what she'd done, shame for what she was. Her makeup covered the flush in her cheeks and camouflaged the furrow in her brow. She gave Lee one last meaningful tap and then walked away from Lun Kao as slowly as she'd arrived, an impassive statue heading back to the altar that gave it life. But really, underneath her paint, she was fleeing the scene of her crime, her heart threatening to pound her chest into dust. And I think it really puts into perspective, just the Kyoshi that we're dealing with here, that most of this chapter you feel like, yes, this is the Kyoshi we know. This is like 40-year-old Kyoshi here. But then right at the end you realize that it's still this very inexperienced and young character, 17-year-old Kyoshi, who can put on this sort of almost like facade of how confident and strong she is. She can be that character. But then she doesn't have this whole other section to herself as the Avatar. So the nuance of just going in there to take out the triads, but she has to be so violent and barrel through people's homes to get to them. And then she ends up taking out the actual guards because they're corrupt. And she knows they're corrupt, but the people don't. So they just view her as just being violent, that she just goes in, takes names, and that's all that she's about. And this is, in a way, this chapter is meant to sort of be a small-scale version of what is going to happen over the course of the book. That Kyoshi realizing that her strengths are in how physically capable she is, not the nuances of politics, governments, and stuff like that. And so in the same way that she's made to feel sort of shamed for basically what happens here, something relatively similar to this happens over the course of the book with regards to her trying to get involved in the politics in the Fire Nation, and it's just revealed to not be her forte. Her forte is being a physical threat, a deterrent in that way. That if there is someone who needs to get taken out, that is what she can do. She just inherently struggles with the other side of things. And I like some of the emotional stuff that they touch on here, of just, she's accepted that she killed Zhu, but it still is something that lingers within her, that, she's killed one person, but she hasn't fully gone past this to open the door into killing other people. But she's still doing violent things just as heavy as like anyone else, as John Zhu. That's the comparison that you are meant to have, is that in the same way that we saw John Zhu in the first book be willing to do anything to get what he wanted, it's kind of what Kyoshi is doing here. You'll note that she is using the exact same earthbending technique that he's using on the guards, that being putting earth over the face. That's what he did to her when he sort of dominated her before she sort of escaped from him. That's kind of significant, that she's using John Zhu's advice to know what's going on here. And inadvertently, without wanting to, she's sort of becoming very, very like him. Except she doesn't have any of the political prowess that Jianzhu actually did have. And that's the sort of significant part of this, in a way. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff that Kyoshi's sort of dealing with here. But yeah, this is one of the only few chapters that take place before we go to the Fire Nation. There's just, I think, 2 or 3 more chapters, and then we're straight into the Fire Nation stuff. So, yeah, that's the first chapter of the book. There's my analysis of it. It's definitely not the most, you know, interesting chapter. It is more of just a reintroduction to the character. Like, the plot that she's going through here, taking out other Dao Fei, makes sense based on what happened in the first book. That's what she'd be doing all this time. And then, because of what happened in the first book, she's feeling these specific ways. The person that she killed, the fact that she's sort of going down the path of Jianzhu without wanting to, and then significantly, it's because she's separated from all of her friends. Rangi's not with her, the Flying Opera Company's not with her, it's her on her own, as we see with only Monk Jinpa around in the next chapter. But yeah, that's been my chapter analysis for Chapter 1 of The Rise of Kyoshi, the Shadow of Kyoshi. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this chapter, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.